The first thing Eleanor Grayson noticed was the light, sharp, crystalline, and unrelenting. It spilled from the chandelier above, a cascade of prisms that fractured the darkness into 1,000 glittering shards. She blinked, her mind clawing, its way out of a fog she couldn't name. Her wrists ached, bound tightly behind her back, the silk cord biting into her skin. On her left hand, the Grayson Lux diamond ring caught the light, a cold, perfect reminder of the empire she'd built. She shifted slightly, testing the restraints, and felt the cool marble floor beneath her knees. This wasn't her office, her penthouse, or any place she recognized, yet the air carried a faint whiff of polished wood, like the oak desk she'd sat behind for 30 years. A voice crackled through an unseen speaker, low and deliberate. "Welcome, Eleanor. Your brother sold you for $10 million. Her breath caught, but she didn't flinch. Not yet. The words hung in the room, heavy as the chandelier itself, and she forced her pulse to steady. Daniel. Her little brother, 52, years old and still a child in her eyes, always chasing the next gamble, the next quick fix. She'd seen this coming, hadn't she? The late-night calls, the trembling pleas for money, the way his voice broke when she'd said no. She closed her eyes for a moment, picturing him in her office just last week, his cheap suit wrinkled, his hands wringing like a boy caught stealing. "I can't keep carrying you, Daniel," she'd told him, her tone flat as she signed a contract worth twice his debts. "You're on your own." She'd meant it. 30 years of discipline had forged her into this. Eleanor Grayson, CEO of Grayson Lux, a name synonymous with elegance and unshakable resolve. She didn't bend, didn't break. Not for him, not for anyone. And yet here she was, bound and betrayed, the irony as sharp as the diamond on her finger. "They can't break me," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the hum of the chandelier's crystals swaying faintly in some invisible draft. She opened her eyes, scanning the room. It was opulent. Too opulent. Velvet drapes framed tall windows, their deep burgundy glowing under the light. A mahogany table sat in the corner, its surface gleaming like it had been polished an hour ago. The scent of wood polish lingered, stirring a memory she couldn't place. Her mother's kitchen, the smell of coffee brewing on a Sunday morning, Daniel tugging at her sleeve for a sip. She shook it off. Sentiment was a luxury she'd long discarded. The voice had said sold, like she was a commodity, a piece of jewelry to be auctioned off. The thought pricked at her pride, but she swallowed it down. Anger wouldn't serve. Her now. Control would. She'd faced boardroom coups, hostile takeovers, and tabloid scandals, all without raising her voice or losing her grip. This was no different. A test of her will, her dignity. Whoever was behind this, Daniel or someone pulling his strings, they'd underestimated her. Her mind raced, piecing together the fragments. Daniel's debts had spiraled, she knew that much. The last time he'd come begging, his eyes were bloodshot, his excuses thinner than ever. "Just one more time, Ellie," he'd said, using the nickname she hadn't heard since they were kids. She'd turned away, staring out her office window at the Manhattan skyline, her reflection cold and unyielding in the glass. "No," she'd said, final as a gavel. He'd left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. That was 6 days ago. Now, this. $10 million. A laughable sum, really, for a woman whose company raked in billions. But to Daniel, it was a lifeline, or a noose. She wondered which he'd chosen. The chandelier hummed again, its light flickering briefly, casting shadows that danced across the walls. She straightened her spine, ignoring the ache in her shoulders. She wouldn't slump, wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her weak. If this was a game, she'd play it her way. Calm, calculated, unbreakable. She'd built Grayson Lux from nothing, clawing her way up through a world that didn't want her. A single mother turned titan who'd traded softness for steel. She'd walked away from her past, from the daughter she couldn't keep, from the brother she couldn't save. Regret was a ghost she'd buried long ago. Footsteps echoed outside the door. Slow, deliberate, the sound of polished shoes on marble. Her jaw tightened, but her face remained a mask. She wouldn't shout, wouldn't beg. They wanted a reaction, a crack in her armor. They wouldn't get it. She thought of her mother again, unbidden. Those quiet Sundays, the way she'd stir the coffee pot with a steady hand, humming a tune Eleanor couldn't recall. "You're stronger than you know, Ellie," she'd said once, her voice warm as the brew. Eleanor had believed her then. She believed it now. The door creaked open, a sliver of light spilling in from the hall. She lifted her chin, her gray eyes steady, reflecting the chandelier's cold glow. Whoever stepped through that door. Daniel. A stranger, an enemy. She'd face them as she'd faced everything else, with dignity intact, her pride a shield no one could pierce. They could tie her hands, take her freedom, but they couldn't touch what mattered most. Not her company, not her wealth, but the core of who she was, a woman who'd learned to stand tall when the world tried to bring her to her knees. The footsteps stopped. A shadow loomed in the doorway. Eleanor exhaled slowly, her voice a whisper meant only for herself. "Let's see who dares to challenge me." The door swung open fully, revealing a man in a tailored black suit, his silver hair catching the chandelier's light like a crown of frost. Eleanor recognized him instantly, Julian Voss, a name that had once been a thorn in her side, a rival who'd nearly toppled Grayson Lux in a bidding war a decade ago. His presence here, in this gilded cage, sent a ripple through her carefully, guarded composure, but she didn't let it show. She met his gaze, her gray eyes steady as steel, her bound hands resting calmly against her back. He stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking on the marble, and stopped a few feet away, his lips curling into a faint, knowing smile. "Eleanor Grayson," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "You've always been a formidable opponent. I'd say it's a pleasure to see you again, but under these circumstances—" He gestured vaguely at her restraints, the smile deepening. "Well, let's call it poetic." She didn't respond immediately. Silence was her weapon now, a shield against his provocation. She studied him, the sharp lines of his jaw, the expensive watch glinting at his wrist, the air of a man who'd never known defeat. Julian Voss wasn't just a businessman. He was a predator, one who thrived on outmaneuvering others. What game was he playing now, and why drag her into it? She kept her breathing even, her mind racing but her face a mask of indifference. Behind him, a young woman stepped into the room, her movements quiet and precise. She carried a leather-bound notebook, her dark hair pulled into a neat bun, her simple gray dress a stark contrast to the opulence around her. Julian waved a hand toward her. "This is Anna Harper, my secretary. She'll be assisting us during your stay." Eleanor's eyes flicked to the girl, Anna. She couldn't have been more than 25, her face plain but striking, with high cheekbones and a gaze that lingered a beat too long. There was something in those eyes, a flicker of recognition Eleanor couldn't place, like a shadow moving just beyond the light. Her chest tightened, an instinct she couldn't name, but she dismissed it. She had no time for distractions. Julian continued, pacing slowly as he spoke. "You've built quite a legacy, Eleanor. Grayson Lux, elegance, power, untouchable. But I've always wondered, is your honor as flawless as your diamonds, or is it just another polished facade?" His tone was light, almost conversational, but the words cut deep, a deliberate jab at her pride. She tilted her head slightly, her voice low and measured when she finally spoke. "If you're fishing for weakness, Julian, you'll need better bait than cheap taunts." She wouldn't rise to his challenge, wouldn't let him see the sting of his words. Honor. It was the one thing she'd clung to through every sacrifice, leaving her daughter, cutting ties with Daniel, building an empire on the ashes of her past. She'd told herself it was necessary, that strength meant letting go. Now, bound and humiliated, she wondered if he saw through her. Julian chuckled, a sound that echoed off the velvet drapes. "Oh, I'm not here to break you. I'm here to fix something you broke long ago. Call it an old promise." His eyes darkened, a hint of something personal beneath the polished exterior. An old promise? She searched her memory. Their rivalry had been fierce but professional, no debts unpaid, no grudges deep enough for this. What was he after? Anna moved to a side table, setting down her notebook with a soft thud. She poured a cup of coffee from a silver carafe, the rich aroma curling through the air, and placed it within Eleanor's reach. Her hands trembled slightly, a detail Eleanor caught but didn't dwell on. "It's black," Anna said, her voice quiet but steady. "No sugar. I assume that's how you take it." Eleanor glanced at the cup, then at Anna. "You assumed correctly." She didn't move to take it. Her hands were still tied, but the gesture puzzled her. A small act of courtesy in this bizarre prison. Why? She looked back at Anna, and that flicker in the girl's eyes returned, sharper now, like a memory trying to surface. It reminded her of someone she'd buried deep. Her thoughts drifted, unbidden, to a rainy night 34 years ago. She'd stood under a flickering street lamp, a newborn bundled in her arms, her suitcase at her feet. The adoption agent's car had pulled up, and she'd handed over the child, her daughter, without a word. "I have to be strong," she'd whispered to herself, the rain soaking her coat, her resolve hardening with every step away. She'd never looked back, never let herself wonder what became of that little girl. It was the price of survival, of becoming Eleanor Grayson. The memory faded as quickly as it came. She forced her focus back to Julian, who was watching her with that same cryptic smile. "Daniel's debt was just the opening move," he said. "You're here because of choices you made long before he picked up a deck of cards. Choices that left scars." Scars? The word hung between them, heavy and vague. She wanted to press him, to demand answers, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, the silk cord digging deeper into her wrists. "If you have a point, Julian, make it. I don't waste time on riddles." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You will, because this isn't about money or power. It's about what you've forgotten, or chosen to ignore." He turned to Anna. "Bring the file. Let's see if she remembers." Anna hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of her notebook, then nodded and left the room. Eleanor watched her go, that strange unease growing. The coffee sat untouched, its steam rising in lazy curls, carrying a scent that tugged at her again. Her mother's kitchen, Sunday mornings, the warmth she'd traded for this cold, glittering world. She pushed it aside. Whatever Julian had planned, whatever Daniel had done, she'd face it with the same resolve that had carried her this far. Dignity wasn't a gift. It was a choice, one she'd make again and again, no matter the cost. The door clicked shut behind Anna. Julian's smile faded, and for a moment, his eyes held something almost human, regret perhaps, or resolve of his own. Eleanor braced herself. The game was only beginning. The room fell silent after Anna's departure, the chandelier's faint hum filling the void Julian left behind as he stepped back, his shadow retreating to the edge of the light. Eleanor remained still, her wrists chafing against the silk cord, but her posture was unyielding, a statue carved from years of discipline. The untouched coffee sat on the table, its steam curling upward like a ghost of something she'd once known. She wouldn't let Julian's cryptic words unravel her. "Scars," he'd said. "Choices." They were barbs meant to pierce her, armor, but she'd faced worse. Boardroom betrayals, whispered rumors, the weight of a legacy built on sacrifice. She'd endure this too. A soft click broke her thoughts. Anna returned, carrying a sleek phone instead of the file Julian had requested. She placed it on the table beside the coffee, her movements deliberate, her eyes avoiding Eleanor's. "He said you'd want to make a call," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Then she stepped back, folding her hands in front of her gray dress, a silent sentinel in the room's grandeur. Eleanor's gaze lingered on the phone, a lifeline in this gilded prison. She didn't ask how Julian knew, or why he'd allow it. She wouldn't beg for favors. Instead, she nodded once, a curt acknowledgement, and Anna untied her wrists with swift, practiced motions. The silk fell away, leaving red marks on her skin, but Eleanor didn't flinch. She flexed her fingers, feeling the familiar weight of her Grayson Lux ring, and picked up the phone. Her mind settled on one name: Daniel. She dialed his number from memory, each press of the keypad steady despite the storm brewing inside her. The line rang once, twice, then clicked to life. "Ellie?" His voice came through, ragged and thick with something: tears, liquor, or both. "Is that you?" She kept her tone even, cold as the marble beneath her. "You sold me, Daniel, $10 million. Explain yourself." No accusation, no anger, just a statement, a demand for truth. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of hearing her break. A sob crackled through the speaker. "I didn't have a choice, Ellie. They were gonna kill me. Those guys, the ones I owe. I couldn't." His words dissolved into a choked gasp, and she pictured him in that rundown apartment she'd visited once years ago, the air thick with stale smoke and desperation. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't untie my hands," she said, her voice a blade honed by decades of restraint. "You chose money over family. I'm not surprised." The lie stung her tongue. She was surprised, and it hurt more than she'd admit. Daniel had always been weak, a shadow of the boy who'd once trailed her through their mother's kitchen, begging for scraps of her attention. But this was a betrayal she hadn't foreseen. He sniffed, his breathing uneven. "It's not what you think. You'll see, Ellie. I didn't do this to hurt you, I swear it. You'll understand soon." His voice dropped to a whisper, almost lost in the static. "Just trust me." "Trust you?" She let the words hang, sharp and deliberate, but kept her tone level. "You've lost that privilege, Daniel." She wanted to scream, to demand why. Why her? Why now? But she wouldn't. Control was her strength, her dignity, the one thing they couldn't take. She remembered a moment from their childhood. Daniel, maybe 8, fumbling with his shoelaces, in the backyard, his small hands shaking. "Like this," she'd said, kneeling beside him, guiding the loops with patient fingers. He'd grinned up at her, gap-toothed and proud. That boy was gone now, buried under years of bad choices. She'd stopped saving him long ago. The line went silent, then clicked dead. She set the phone down, her movements slow and precise, as if placing a fragile heirloom. Julian stepped forward, his smile gone, replaced by a look she couldn't read. Curiosity, perhaps, or something darker. "Touching," he said, his voice dry. "But we're not done. You'll stay here a week, Eleanor. Consider it a chance to face yourself, your real self, not the polished myth you've sold the world." She met his gaze, unflinching. Week changes nothing. You don't dictate my worth." Her words were a shield, her calm a defiance. She wouldn't let him see the cracks, Daniel's plea, that faint "trust me," gnawing at her resolve. What did he mean? What had he set in motion? Julian tilted his head, studying her. "We'll see." He turned to Anna. "Take her to the guest room. She'll need rest." He paused, then added, "And leave the coffee. She might want it later." Anna nodded, stepping forward, but Eleanor held up a hand. "I can walk myself." She rose, smoothing her skirt with the grace of a woman who'd never known defeat, though her wrists burned and her legs ached from kneeling. Anna hesitated, then picked up the coffee cup instead, cradling it as she led the way out. Eleanor followed, her steps measured, the chandelier's light fading behind her. In the hall, Anna stopped abruptly, the cup slipping from her hands. It hit the marble with a sharp crack, coffee pooling dark and bitter across the floor. A silver necklace spilled from her pocket in the chaos, a delicate chain with a tiny pendant Eleanor hadn't seen in decades. Her breath caught, but she forced it steady. That necklace, she'd left it with her daughter, a final gift before walking away under that rainy street lamp. Her eyes darted to Anna, who knelt to clean the mess, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Careless," Eleanor said, her voice soft but firm, masking the tremor in her chest. Anna didn't look up, didn't speak, just gathered the shards and the necklace with shaking fingers. Eleanor turned away, her mind racing. A coincidence, surely. She wouldn't let it shake her, not yet. The hall stretched ahead, lined with gilded frames and shadows. She walked on, her dignity intact, but Daniel's words echoed. "You'll understand soon." She feared he might be right. The hallway stretched before Eleanor like a tunnel of shadows and gold, its walls adorned with ornate frames that caught the faint glow of sconces. She followed Anna in silence, her steps steady despite the ache. In her legs, the red marks on her wrists a quiet testament to her ordeal. The spilled coffee lingered in her mind. Not the mess, but the necklace. That tiny pendant, a ghost from a life she'd buried, had rattled her more than she'd let on. She pushed it aside, locking it behind the iron wall of her resolve. She wouldn't crumble, not here, not now. Anna stopped at a heavy oak door, her fingers brushing the brass handle. "This is your room," she said, her voice low, almost swallowed by the hall's stillness. She opened it, revealing a space as lavish as the rest of the mansion. Plush, carpets, a four-poster bed draped in silk, a window framing the city's distant lights. Eleanor stepped inside, her Grayson Lux ring glinting as she scanned the room. It was a prison dressed in finery, but she wouldn't let it define her. "Anything else?" Eleanor asked, her tone clipped but calm. Anna shook her head, clutching her notebook like a shield, and slipped out, the door clicking shut behind her. Alone, Eleanor exhaled, a slow, controlled breath that steadied her pulse. She wouldn't sit idle. If Julian wanted her to face herself, she'd start by understanding this place, this game. She moved to a bookshelf in the corner, its polished wood exhaling a faint scent of pine that tugged at her memory. Her fingers trailed the spines, leather-bound classics, untouched for years, their edges dusted with neglect. She pulled one out, a volume of Dickens, and something slipped from between its pages, fluttering to the floor. A photograph, yellowed and creased, landed face up at her feet. Eleanor bent to retrieve it, her movements deliberate, her heart betraying her with a sudden thud. The image was simple, faded. Two children in a backyard, arms slung around each other, grinning at the camera. She recognized the scene instantly, the rickety swing set, the patchy grass, the smell of pine drifting from the woods nearby. It was her and Daniel, maybe 10 and 8, captured in a moment before everything changed. Her hair was wild, his cheeks smudged with dirt, and behind them, their mother's shadow loomed, holding the camera with that quiet strength Eleanor had once idolized. She held the photo, her thumb brushing the edge, and the pine scent sharpened in her nostrils, pulling her back. She'd loved those woods, running through them with Daniel, chasing fireflies until their mother called them in for supper. "You're my best friend, Ellie," he'd said once, his small hand gripping hers as they sat under a tree, the air thick with summer. She'd promised to always look out for him, a promise she'd broken when ambition took root, when she chose Grayson Lux over the family she couldn't save. The door creaked open, snapping her from the memory. Anna stood there, her gray dress stark against the room's richness, her eyes widening as they landed on the photo. "What are you doing?" Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a crack in her usual reserve. Eleanor straightened, holding the photo out. "I found this. It doesn't belong here, or to you." Her tone was firm, unshaken, though the past clung to her like damp earth. She wouldn't let Anna see the tremor in her soul. Anna stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the image. "You have no right to touch what you've abandoned," she said, her words soft, but cutting. A blade wrapped in silk. She reached for the photo, but Eleanor pulled it back, her eyes narrowing. "I didn't abandon anything," Eleanor replied, her voice a low, controlled hum. "I chose survival. You wouldn't understand." She wouldn't justify herself, not to this girl, not to anyone. But the lie tasted bitter. She'd abandoned plenty. Daniel, her daughter, the girl she'd been in that backyard. Survival was her excuse, her shield. Anna's lips pressed into a thin line, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "Survival," she echoed, a faint tremor in her voice. "I grew up in an orphanage, sleeping on a cot that smelled of bleach, clutching a necklace because it was all I had left of someone who didn't want me. Don't tell me I wouldn't understand. The words hit Eleanor like a quiet storm, stirring that unease she'd felt since meeting Anna. The necklace. Could it be the same one? She kept her face impassive, her dignity a fortress, but her mind waste. That's your story, she said, her tone even. Not mine. She wouldn't let this unravel her, wouldn't let guilt creep in. She'd made her choices, borne their weight. Regret was a luxury she couldn't afford. Anna took a step back, her eyes glistening but hard. Keep the photo if it means so much to you, she said, turning away. But it doesn't change what you left behind. She paused at the door, her hand on the frame. Dinner's in an hour. Julian expects you there. Then she was gone, leaving Eleanor with the echo of her words. Eleanor stood motionless, the photo still in her hand. Anna's story gnawed at her. An orphanage, a necklace, a wound too close to her own buried past. She thought of that rainy night again, the baby she'd given up, the pendant she'd tucked into the blanket as a final act of something. Love, perhaps, or cowardice. No, it was coincidence, nothing more. She wouldn't let it shake her. She set the photo on the shelf, her fingers lingering on its edge, the pine scent fading into the room's sterile richness. Julian wanted her to face herself? Fine. She'd walk into his game with her head high, her dignity intact. Daniel's betrayal, Anna's quiet accusations. They wouldn't break her. She'd built her life on control, on honor earned through sacrifice. Whatever lay ahead, she'd meet it as Eleanor Grayson, unbowed, unbroken. The city lights flickered beyond the window, a silent witness to her resolve. She smoothed her skirt, her ring catching the light, and prepared herself. The past could haunt her, but it wouldn't claim her. The guest room felt smaller as the evening deepened, its silk-draped walls pressing in like a velvet cage. Eleanor stood by the window, her reflection a faint ghost against the glass, the city's lights, twinkling below like stars she couldn't reach. The photo of her and Daniel rested on the shelf, its edges curling slightly, a silent accusation she refused to answer. Anna's words echoed in her mind. What you left behind. But she kept them at bay, her resolve a steel thread holding her together. She wouldn't falter, not under Julian's roof, not beneath the weight of a past she'd buried. A sharp knock broke her reverie. Anna entered, her gray dress pristine despite the earlier spill, her face a mask of quiet determination. Dinner's ready, she said, her voice steady. But there's something you should see first. She crossed to a small television mounted in the corner, flicking it on with a remote. The screen flared to life, and Eleanor's stomach tightened as a news anchor's voice filled the room. Breaking news. Eleanor Grayson, CEO of Grayson Lux, has vanished. Sources report she was last seen leaving her Manhattan office 3 days ago. Speculation is rife. Abduction, scandal, or a strategic retreat. The luxury empire hangs in the balance as investors panic. The screen cut to a flurry of flashbulbs. Outside her office building, reporters shouting questions into the night. Eleanor's face, poised, impeccable, flashed across the broadcast, a promotional photo from last year's gala. She watched, her expression unchanging, though her fingers tightened around the Grayson Lux ring. The media circus wasn't new. She'd weathered storms before. But this was different. This was personal, a public stripping of her control. Julian swept into the room, his black suit immaculate, his smile sharp as a blade. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? He said, gesturing at the screen. Your disappearance is the story of the hour. Imagine what they'd pay for the truth. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I could give it to them, Eleanor. Every detail, every scar you've hidden, unless you play along. She turned to face him, her gray eyes cold and unyielding. Threats don't move me, Julian. You should know that by now. Her tone was even, a quiet defiance honed over decades. She wouldn't let him see the flicker of unease, the boardroom pressure, the investors' doubt, the empire she'd built teetering on the edge. She'd faced worse and emerged stronger. This was just another test. He tilted his head, studying her. Not a threat. A choice. Stay here, face what's coming, or watch your legacy burn in the headlines. 1 week, Eleanor. That's all I ask. He paused, his smile fading. Or perhaps you'd rather call their bluff. She didn't answer, her silence a wall he couldn't breach. The television droned on, a reporter's voice cutting through. Insiders hint at a family secret. Could Daniel Grayson, the CEO's estranged brother, be involved? Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure, her breathing steady. Daniel's name in the spotlight wasn't a surprise. He'd always been a liability, but it stung nonetheless. Anna stood by the TV, her hands clasped tightly, her gaze fixed on the screen. Eleanor caught a flicker of movement, Anna slipping a phone from her pocket, her fingers tapping out a message with swift precision. The girl's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, Eleanor saw something raw in her eyes. Worry, resolve, a shadow of sacrifice. What was she doing? The broadcast shifted. A new voice broke in. Update. A source close to Grayson Lux denies abduction rumors, claiming Eleanor Grayson is on a private retreat. The company remains stable, per an anonymous tip. The anchor faltered, caught off guard, and the screen cut to a stock ticker. Grayson Lux shares steadying after a sharp dip. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, darting to Anna, who pocketed the phone, and turned away, busying herself with straightening the remote. A coincidence? No. Anna had intervened, quietly steering the narrative, protecting the empire Eleanor had built. Why? The question gnawed at her, but she kept it locked behind her. Calm exterior, she wouldn't ask, not yet. Julian chuckled, a low, amused sound. Well, well, someone's playing guardian angel. Too bad it won't last. He stepped toward the door, pausing to look back. Dinner's waiting. Don't be late. He left, his footsteps fading down the hall. Anna lingered, her back to Eleanor, her shoulders tense. Eleanor watched her, piecing it together. Anna's trembling hands, the necklace. Now this. You didn't have to do that, she said, her voice soft but firm, testing the waters. Anna turned, her eyes meeting Eleanor's for a fleeting moment. I didn't do it for you, she said, her tone clipped. I did it for someone else. She hesitated, then added, I've seen what happens when people lose everything. I won't let it happen again. Her voice cracked slightly, and Eleanor glimpsed a memory in her words. Daniel, perhaps, slumped on a couch, feverish and frail, Anna pressing a damp cloth to his forehead. A caretaker's instinct, born from a life Eleanor couldn't fathom, before she could respond. Anna left, the door closing with a soft thud. Eleanor stood alone, the television flickering to static, the flashbulb's blaze reduced to a hum. She thought of Daniel. Of that night she'd found him sick, years ago, his apartment a wreck. She'd stayed just long enough to call a doctor, then left, her heels clicking on the stairs as she fled his weakness. Anna's words echoed. I won't let it happen again. Was that it? A loyalty to Daniel she'd never earned? The phone on her desk rang, shrill and insistent, her board of directors no doubt demanding answers. She let it ring, her hand steady at her sides. The world could wait. She'd face Julian's dinner, Anna's quiet defiance, and whatever came next with the same dignity that had carried her this far. The flashbulbs could blaze. They wouldn't burn her down. She smoothed her skirt, the ring catching the light, and walked to the door. The game was shifting, but she'd play it her way. Unshaken, unbroken. A woman who'd learned to stand tall when the world tried to tear her apart. The dining room glowed with a warmth that felt hollow, its long mahogany table set with crystal, and silver under the chandelier's relentless gleam. Eleanor sat at one end, her posture impeccable, the Grayson Lux ring a quiet anchor on her finger. Julian occupied the head, his black suit a shadow against the candlelight, while Anna stood, near a sideboard, her gray dress blending into the room's edges. The meal, roasted lamb, asparagus, a wine Eleanor didn't touch, sat untouched before her, a formality she refused to indulge. She wouldn't break bread with her captors, wouldn't soften under their gaze. Julian leaned back, swirling his glass, his eyes fixed on her with a predator's patience. "You've been a model guest, Eleanor," he said, his voice smooth as the wine. Silent, composed, every inch the Titan. But dinner isn't just for eating. It's for revelations. He set the glass down, the clink sharp against the silence, and nodded to Anna. "Bring it." Anna hesitated, her hands tightening around her notebook, then crossed to a drawer in the sideboard. She pulled out a slim folder, its edges worn, and placed it before Julian with a reverence that unsettled Eleanor. He opened it, revealing a stack of papers, documents, photos, a history she couldn't yet see. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her face a mask, her breathing steady. She wouldn't give him the reaction he craved. 34 years ago, Julian began, sliding a birth certificate across the table. "You had a daughter, born in a hospital upstate, no father listed. You named her Anna." He paused, letting the words sink in. 3 days later, you gave her up. Signed her away without a backward glance. Eleanor's chest tightened, a vice clamping around her heart. But she didn't flinch. "You're mistaken," she said, her voice low and firm, a shield against the storm rising inside her. She glanced at the document, her signature, unmistakable, scrawled in the ink of a younger, desperate woman. The memory flooded back. The rain-soaked night, the baby's cries fading as she handed her over. The pendant tucked into the blanket like a whispered apology. She'd told herself it was strength, not cowardice. She'd been wrong. Julian leaned forward, his smile gone. "No mistake. Anna Harper, your Anna, stands right here." He gestured to the girl, who froze, her eyes locked on the floor. "She's been my secretary for 3 years, watching you from afar, protecting you in ways you'll never deserve." Eleanor's gaze shifted to Anna, slow and deliberate, searching her face. Those high cheekbones, that quiet intensity. Suddenly, they weren't just familiar, they were hers. The necklace, the spilled coffee, the fierce resolve, it all clicked, a puzzle she'd refused to solve. Her daughter, here, alive, a stranger who'd shaped her prison. She swallowed, her throat dry, but her voice held steady. "If this is true, prove it." Anna looked up, her eyes meeting Eleanor's for the first time, raw and unguarded. "I don't need to prove it," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I took this job to see you, to save Grace and Lux when you couldn't. Not because I wanted you back, but because I needed to know why you left me." She pulled the necklace from her pocket, the pendant dangling like a shard of their shared past. "This was all I had. I kept it to survive." The room spun, the chandelier's light blurring into a haze, but Eleanor anchored herself. She wouldn't collapse, wouldn't let the guilt drown her. She rose, her knees trembling beneath her skirt, and stepped toward Anna. "I left you because I had nothing to give," she said, her words measured, each one a stone laid over her shame. "I was 24, broke, alone. I thought you'd have a better life without me." Anna's eyes glistened, but she didn't back down. "A better life? I had nothing, no one, until I fought my way up. I don't need you now, but I stayed. Because Grace and Lux was yours. I couldn't let it fall." Her voice broke, a crack in her armor, and Eleanor saw the truth. Anna's strength mirrored her own, forged in the fire of abandonment. Julian watched, silent, his role in this tableau unclear. Eleanor turned to him, her dignity a lifeline. "Why now? What's your stake in this?" Her tone was calm, a demand wrapped in control, though her hands shook faintly at her sides. He stood, folding the folder shut. "That's for later. For, now you've seen the truth, what you do with it is up to you." He walked out, leaving the air thick with unspoken questions. Eleanor sank to her knees before Anna, not in defeat, but in a gesture she couldn't name. Penance, perhaps. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice raw but steady, tears spilling down her cheeks. I was wrong. I failed you. She wouldn't beg forgiveness. She didn't deserve it. But she'd offer this, her honesty, her regret. Anna stepped back, wiping her eyes, the necklace clutched in her fist. I don't need you to be my mother, she said, her voice hardening. I needed you then, not now. She turned away, her shoulders rigid, and left the room, the door slamming shut like a gavel. Eleanor stayed there, the chandelier casting its cold light over her, the lamp cooling on the table. The truth was out, her daughter, alive, a mirror, of her own resilience. She'd built Grace and Lux to escape that rainy night, to prove her worth. But it hadn't erased the cost. She rose, wiping her face, her ring catching the glow. She wouldn't shatter, wouldn't lose herself to this pain. Dignity was her choice, her strength even now. The city hummed beyond the window, indifferent to her unraveling. She thought of Daniel, his cryptic, "Trust me," and wondered if he'd known. The game had shifted, but she'd face it as she always had, unbroken, her honor bruised but intact, ready for whatever came next. The mansion's rooftop was a stark contrast to the gilded rooms below, a windswept expanse of slate tiles and iron railings, open to the night sky. Eleanor stood near the edge, her skirt rippling in the cold breeze, the city's lights sprawling beneath her like a map of her triumphs and failures. The chandelier's glow was a memory now, replaced by the faint hum of traffic and the bite of the air against her skin. She'd followed Julian's summons here after dinner, her resolve hardened by Anna's rejection, her gray eyes fixed on the horizon. She wouldn't break, not for her daughter's pain, not for Julian's games. Julian leaned against the railing, his silver hair catching the moonlight, his voice cutting through the wind. It's a beautiful view, isn't it? A fitting stage for your final choice. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. Grace and Lux is crumbling. Rumors, stock dips, your absence. I can end it all. One press release. Eleanor Grayson, kidnapped, betrayed by her brother. The world will eat it up, and your empire falls. Or... He paused, letting the wind carry the weight. You admit Anna is your daughter, publicly, tonight. And I'll bury the story. Your legacy lives. Eleanor's hands tightened at her sides, the Grayson Lux ring digging into her finger, but her face remained a mask of calm. You think you can blackmail me into shame? She said, her voice steady, a quiet defiance honed by decades of battles. I've faced worse than your threats, Julian. My honor isn't for sale. She wouldn't let him see the tremor in her soul, the thought of Anna's name in headlines, the daughter she'd failed exposed to the world's judgment. Before Julian could respond, a figure stumbled onto the rooftop, his cheap coat flapping in the wind. Daniel. His face was gaunt, his eyes red-rimmed, but he carried something, a faded knit scarf, its frayed edges fluttering like a flag of surrender. Ellie, he rasped, his voice breaking. Don't listen to him yet. I need to tell you something. Eleanor turned to him, her posture rigid, her tone icy but controlled. You've said enough, Daniel. Your apologies don't undo this. She wouldn't soften, wouldn't let his desperation sway her. He'd sold her, betrayed her. His presence here was salt in the wound. He shook his head, clutching the scarf tighter. I knew about Anna, he said, his words tumbling out. Years ago, I tracked her down, found her in that orphanage, saw the necklace. I didn't tell you because you'd shut me out already. But when the debts came, when they threatened me, I went to Julian. I sold you to him. Not for money, Ellie, but to bring you here, to make you see her. He held out the scarf, his hands, trembling. Mom made this for you. I kept it all these years. I just wanted our family back. The revelation hit her like a gust, sharp and cold, but she didn't waver. Her eyes flicked to the scarf, her mother's careful stitches, the wool she'd worn as a girl, a relic of a time when family meant everything. Daniel had orchestrated this, not out of greed, but a twisted, desperate love. She wanted to lash out, to call him a fool, but she held it in, her dignity a lifeline. "You don't fix a family by breaking it," she said, her voice low, unshaken. "I don't need your excuses." Julian stepped forward, his smile faint but edged with something new, respect perhaps. "He's telling the truth. I agreed because I owed Anna's guardian a debt, keeping her safe until she could face you. But now it's your move, Eleanor. The clock's ticking." She looked between them, Julian, the puppet master, Daniel, the broken brother, and felt the weight of their choices pressing down. The wind howled, tugging at her hair, but she stood firm, her mind racing. Grayson Lux or Anna, her empire or her daughter. The world would judge her either way. Ruthless, tycoon or failed mother. She'd spent decades building a name, a fortress of honor, only to see it teeter on the edge of this moment. Then Anna emerged from the shadows, her gray dress catching the moonlight, her face pale but resolute. "If you won't choose me," she said, her voice cutting through the wind, "I'll walk away forever. I don't need your empire or your name. I needed a mother, and you weren't there." She stepped closer, her eyes locked on Eleanor's. "Make your choice, me or Grayson Lux, but don't expect me to wait." Eleanor's breath caught, but she didn't falter. Anna's ultimatum was a mirror of her own strength, unyielding, fierce, a daughter she'd shaped without knowing. She thought of that rainy night, the pendant, the years she'd justified with success. She'd told herself honor was power, control, the legacy she'd built. But here, on this rooftop, with the wind stripping away pretense, she saw it differently. Honor was sacrifice, the courage to own her failures. She turned to Julian, her voice calm, deliberate. "I won't be your pawn. You don't dictate my truth." Then to Daniel, "You meant well, but this isn't redemption." Finally she faced Anna, her gray eyes softening but steady. "I failed you once. I won't again. Not by hiding. Not by choosing a company over you." She picked up the scarf from Daniel's hands, its wool warm despite the cold, and stepped to the railing. The phone Julian had left on a table buzzed, reporters no doubt hungry for a statement. She ignored it, her gaze on Anna. "I'll tell the world you're mine," she said, her voice firm, unshaken. "Not because he demands it, but because it's right." She held out the scarf, a quiet offering. "If you'll take it." Anna stared, her resolve wavering, then turned away, the wind swallowing her silence. Eleanor stood there, the scarf fluttering, her dignity intact. She wouldn't beg, wouldn't break. The choice was made. Her honor redefined, not by power, but by the family she'd lost and found. The rooftop held its breath, waiting for what came next. The wind died as Eleanor stood on the rooftop, the knit scarf still in her hands, its frayed edges brushing her fingers like a whisper from the past. Anna's silence lingered, a wall between them. But Eleanor didn't waver. She'd made her choice, her daughter over her empire, truth over pride, and it settled over her like a quiet strength. The city lights flickered below, indifferent to her stand, but she felt no need to conquer them now. Her honor wasn't in the skyline anymore. It was here, in this moment, fragile, yet unbroken. Julian broke the stillness, stepping forward with a nod of something like approval. "You've chosen," he said, his voice softer than before, stripped of its earlier edge. "I'll arrange the press conference. Midnight, in the ballroom. The world will know Anna is yours." He turned to leave but paused, his hand on the door. "There's one more thing you should hear before the cameras roll." Eleanor met his gaze, her gray eyes steady, the scarf a grounding weight. "If it's another game, I'm done playing," she said, her tone calm, resolute. She wouldn't let him toy with her again, not after this. He smiled faintly, almost human. "No game, just the truth." He looked at Anna, still facing away, then back at Eleanor. "I'm her godfather. When you gave her up, her guardian, a friend of mine, asked me to watch over her. I did, from a distance, until she was old enough to choose her own path. This," he gestured to the rooftop, the scarf, the moment, was my debt to him, paid in full. The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through her. Julian, not just a rival, but a guardian. A silent thread tying her past to this present. She didn't flinch, didn't let surprise crack her composure, though her mind raced. "Why not tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice low, controlled. "Because she deserved to face you first," he said simply, "and you deserve to earn it." He left then, the door clicking shut, his shadow fading into the night. Daniel shuffled closer, his coat flapping, his eyes glistening. "Ellie, he started, but she raised a hand, silencing him with a look. "You've said enough," she replied, her tone firm but not harsh. "You meant to fix us, but you broke more than you mended. We'll talk later." She wouldn't absolve him yet, his betrayal still stung, but she wouldn't cast him out either. He nodded, clutching the railing, and stayed quiet, a broken figure in the wind. Eleanor turned to Anna, who hadn't moved, her back rigid against the city's glow. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, stepping closer, the scarf held out like an offering. "I failed you, 34 years ago and every day since. But I'm here now, not as a CEO, not as a myth, but as your mother. If you'll have me." Anna turned slowly, her face pale, her eyes wet but fierce. She took the scarf, her fingers brushing Eleanor's, and held it close. "I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I won't run anymore." She stepped forward, and Eleanor pulled her into an embrace, tentative at first, then tight, the wool pressed between them, a bridge across decades of loss. Anna didn't sob, didn't collapse, just stood there, strong as Eleanor had become, a mirror of resilience. The ballroom was a blaze of flashbulbs when they descended, hand in hand. Reporters crowded the space, their voices a roar, but Eleanor faced them with the calm she'd always wielded. She stepped to the podium, Anna at her side, Daniel lingering in the back, his scarf-wrapped hands clasped. The cameras clicked, a storm of light, but she didn't blink. "My name is Eleanor Grayson," she began, her voice steady, resonant. "For 30 years, I built Grayson Lux into what it is. Tonight, I step down as CEO. Not because I was forced, but because I choose something greater. My family." She paused, her hand finding Anna's. "This is Anna Harper, my daughter. I gave her up at birth, a mistake I've carried every day. I'm here to claim her, not for my legacy, but for hers." The room erupted. Shouts, questions, the flashbulbs a relentless tide. But Eleanor stood tall, her dignity a fortress. She wouldn't explain, wouldn't grovel. She'd owned her truth, and that was enough. Anna squeezed her hand, a silent anchor, and Eleanor felt the weight lift, not fully but enough to breathe. Months later, the city's hum had softened. Eleanor sat in a small jewelry shop on a quiet street, its wooden counter scratched but warm, a single lamp casting a gentle light over her work. She crafted a pendant, simple, unadorned, a gift for Anna, who now managed Grayson Lux with a fierceness Eleanor admired. The empire thrived under her daughter's hands, but Eleanor had let it go, trading boardrooms for this modest space, a life rebuilt on her terms. Daniel visited sometimes, sober now, helping with deliveries, his scarf, a constant companion. They didn't speak of the past often, just sat, sharing coffee that smelled like their mother's kitchen, mending what they could in silence. The community knew her story. Some judged, others praised. But she didn't care. Her honor wasn't theirs to define. Anna stepped in one evening, her gray dress swapped for a tailored suit, the scarf draped over her shoulders. "It's done," she said, setting a newspaper on the counter. The headline read, "Grayson Lux soars under new leadership." She smiled, faint but real. "You didn't have to step down, you know." Eleanor looked up, her hands steady on the pendant. "Yes, I did," she said, her voice warm, firm. "Honor isn't power, it's this." She gestured to the shop, to Anna, to the quiet life she'd chosen. "I'm home." Anna nodded, taking the pendant, and they sat together under the gentle light, the city fading beyond the glass. The chandelier's cold glow was gone, replaced by something softer, truer, a legacy not of wealth, but of love reclaimed. If you've enjoyed this journey of heart, honor, and redemption, don't forget to hit that like button. It means the world to me. And if you want more stories that stir the soul and lift the spirit, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep exploring the power of family and resilience together. See you in the next tale.